weather we've had the past couple days. So apologies that you can't see me. I can see you. That's all that matters. So welcome. My name is Aaron Tolson. I'm the CEO of Northern Virginia Food Rescue. I'm a local county resident for several generations. My family actually grew up not too far from you guys. I grew up on the intersection of Minnieville and Spriggs back when it was farmland, before there were houses and everything there. So my family lived up and down Minnieville and Spriggs going up towards 234. So there was the Barnes farm and the Hawkins farm. The Hawkins was my extended family. So I grew up running around in the fields there off Minnieville and Spriggs. Went to Heritage Christian School right down the road off Spriggs. And then went into the military, joined the Air Force, spent 6 years traveling the world and growing up, and then got out and completed a Bachelor of Science degree in computer science, did database development programming for a while for several companies, was involved in a church ministry for about 8 years, doing IT and working with young people. And then got into other philanthropic work, which led me to what I'm doing today. So that's just a little bit about me, but it's good to be here with you guys today. So we're going to talk a little bit here about food waste and hunger in Northern Virginia. So I'll do some kind of instruction education as part of this before really getting into what it is that we do. But if you have questions, feel free to either drop them in the chat, or you can use a little raise your hand notification thing. Happy to interact with you as we go along. And I'll hopefully Rabbi Liz will be able to help monitor that for me as well. So a little bit about just starting off with food insecurity. That's really the space that we operate in from Northern Virginia Food Rescue. So these are some of the questions that are typically asked just to kind of determine if someone is actually food insecure. You're worried you would not have enough to eat. You're unable to eat healthy, nutritious foods consistently. You only ate a few kinds of foods. You had to skip meals. You were hungry but didn't eat, or you went a day without eating. So based on your answers to some of these questions can help us determine the severity of someone's food insecurity. So prior to the pandemic, it was estimated that nearly 7% of the residents here in our county and 13% of our children in our county were food insecure. Obviously, the pandemic changed all of that. So as you may have recalled seeing on TV, the long lines of cars stretched all over the place. And you may have known friends, family members, or you may have actually experienced this yourself over the past year and a half. Food insecurity went through the roof. So we had about a 345% increase in our county at the height of the pandemic. So we are seeing that kind of go back down again, probably over the past 6 months. I will say the highest need we're seeing right now with food insecurity is actually the students in our schools. There's a large number of students who are in food insecure families, and the schools typically would have weekend backpack programs where they would pack up some, foods for the kid to take home on the weekend to get them through the weekend. And schools have been reaching out to us for months now with kids going back to school, where normally they would have 10 kids, 12 kids that they were supporting, and now they've got 70 kids, 100 kids every week that they're trying to support with backpacks. So one of the things, and I'll talk about this later on as well, is helping to fill that gap with food insecurity. So, and really this is about a consistent pattern. Like if you went for a day and didn't eat, like you were hungry and didn't eat, that doesn't mean that you're food insecure. if you're like me, sometimes you just get busy or you just don't feel like cooking dinner or whatever. That's not food insecurity. That's a conscious choice. But really, food insecurity is about a pattern, a consistency of these questions. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So another way to look at it is with this pie chart. So security. There's high food security. You really have no issues. Marginal food security. You may have been concerned about it, but it wasn't really substantially reduced. Low food security. So you still have food to eat, but maybe there's a disruption in the amount of healthy food that you're able to eat, and maybe your diet has had to change. So as we know, fast food is cheap and inexpensive, but not really healthy for you. So while you might be able to still eat, you might be resorting to less than desirable dietary foods. And then very low food security that's out the window. You don't have the money for food, you don't have the resources for food, you can't get to food. So really we focus on that very low food security and try to see what we can do to help with that. So if you're to look at our county, here's a map of food insecurity. So the darker the color, the more food insecure it is. There's a lot along the Route 1 corridor on the eastern side of the county, quite a bit around Manassas Park, and then going up subtly towards 66, also in Manassas, but in the 20109 zip code. And we work with about 70 distribution sites, and you can see the breakdown of distributions. About 45% is to Hispanic populations, 24% Black African American, 21% is to white clients, and 10% is to Asian. And again, that held true kind of before the pandemic, and then during the pandemic, like every category went up about the same percentage. So everything held pretty steady during the pandemic. But there's a lot of need in our county, and for an affluent county, it can be surprising to have such wealth in big homes in our area, and yet there is a lot of need here in our county. About 40% of food is wasted in the United States. That number has gone down a little bit. The estimates are somewhere closer to 35% now in the United States, but 35 to 40% still in the US, and globally food is wasted. So that's a lot of good food that goes uneaten. So a lot of it comes from our homes. And a lot of that has to do with our purchasing habits and our cooking habits. We buy things thinking we're going to cook a meal, or we have intentions, and then plans change, and then it sits in your fridge. And then, 2 weeks later, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot that was in there in the back of my fridge. Oops, that's what smells. And we throw it away. Portion size. So I may have been as early as 50 years ago. The salad plates, if you have a set of dinner plates, you've got like a salad plate, a dinner plate, a bowl, a large bowl, salad bowl. The dinner plate was actually the size of your salad plate. Like that was the dinner plate. And recipes helped you cook for a family at that serving size. So that was the amount of food you would put on your plate. But then it changed. They had bigger plates, and then recipes changed so that you filled the plate more fully. And so the ingredients in recipes started to change. Betty Crocker and some of those, they changed the recipes. So we actually cook more to fill our bigger plates than what they used to. And that also turns into waste because we don't always eat everything that's on our plate. So we fill our plate and then we don't eat it all, then we scrape it off and it goes in the trash. So in our homes, those are the two biggest reasons for a lot of the food waste is our purchasing habits related to preparing meals, and then portion sizes. But then there's 40% from our restaurants, our grocery stores, food service companies. 16% of it's lost at the farm level. It doesn't get picked. There's flooding or famine or pests or any number of reasons why food is lost just at the farm level. And then another 2% is lost just during manufacturing. So there's a lot of food that is grown or in the process of being grown that never even gets eaten. So again, global food loss and waste, around a third is squandered. So that's 1.3 billion tons of wasted food and about $1 trillion in cost. So you've got the cost of water, you've got the cost of soil, you've got the cost of, if they're doing pest control, you have shipping, transportation, all these costs that go into getting food at your table. And that's a lot of waste if it doesn't get eaten. It just goes in the trash. About 45% of fruits and veggies, 35% of seafood, 30% of cereals, 20% of dairy, 20% of meat and poultry. So I wanted to bring this up because I think this is relevant to what we do. In Exodus, the story of the Israelites coming out of Egypt, making their way to the promised land, and God supplied them with manna. They were hungry. So they had bread, every day, bread, lots of bread, plenty of bread, too much bread. Okay, we're done with bread. We want something else. And so they cried out. And so what did God do? God sent quail. So they finally had some meat, some protein. Yes, good protein. And so that was a blessing to them. Sometimes when we think about food insecurity and what we can do to help those who are food insecurity, we can provide food. And there's donations of, we do canned food drives, schools do canned food drives. We try to help support our food pantries to have stuff in their pantries that they can give people who are hungry, which is great. It's food, right? It feeds them. But really those folks that are food insecure need healthy food. They need that produce. They need that meat, dairy, things to round out their diets besides a lot of canned goods, which often are high in sodium. And so part of what we try to do is figure out, how do we not just give people food, but how do we give them stuff that they need that will actually be better for their diet, that will help them with their overall health and wellness? Because it's great if they're eating food, but if it creates other health problems and they end up having to go to the doctor because now they're dealing with diabetes or whatever, then it wasn't very beneficial in the long run. So we're also looking at just the overall health of the clients. But I'm wondering if you might be able to take a second and think about some issues food distribution sites face when it comes to providing fresh, perishable foods. Why is it that canned goods are so popular? Maybe that's another way of putting it. So what do you all think?
Well, we have storage problems. I'm the
Yep.
minister at Bull Run Unitarian Universalist, and we have two food pantries, and we have storage problems. We have to get the fresh produce in, the day before, and we can't store any of it. So that's one of the problems.
Yep, exactly. So storage, particularly cold storage, right?
There's sometimes also issues with the people who are food insecure don't have fully equipped kitchens. So if they might have mini fridges instead of real full-size fridges, they might not have ovens or stoves to cook on. So
Mm-hmm.
more ready-made meals, something you can heat up on a hot plate.
Yep, exactly. Yep, good.
It's easier for that food to spoil and possibly cause illness.
Yep. So you have temperature control issues, right?
My my experience in Chicago when I was in seminary is that oftentimes the folks who are making use of food distribution sites aren't interested in uh, fresh produce. I know we had some people in at one point from, um, oh, I forget which agency, but anyway, trying to, educate folks on uh, nutrition and food preparation so that they would get healthier meals. But a lot of times they just wouldn't take what was fresh.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. You know, when I was at Axe and their campus in Dumfries, they would have fresh produce they would set outside almost daily just for people to take. Like take whatever you want in addition to whatever you're going to get from us, or maybe you just want to come by and pick up some fresh produce. And the amount of stuff that would be left because people didn't know what it was, much less what they were supposed to do with it if they took it. So yeah, education is can be a big part of that issue as well. Yeah. Good. What else? You guys are doing fantastic.
I have been noticing that a lot of people are talking on the fact of why there's maybe not as much fruit and fresh produce and stuff. But as someone who has had to use the resources in the past and is part of a family group, going and trying to find food resources and food banks and things like that, we would basically go around and try to find the food banks that had fresh produce, because even though canned and preserved foods are good to a certain extent, there's also like, how many weeks in a row do you want to be eating canned string beans for dinner?
Yeah,
So it's also important to still have the fresh perishable foods for families.
yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing that.
What about
Yeah.
expiration stuff? I know that coming from California, we have the Good Samaritan law there, which has enabled people to contribute more without worry of recourse or lawsuit, but that doesn't exist here in Virginia.
Actually, it does. That's actually a federal protection. It's the Bill Emerson Act of 1995. I think President Bill Clinton signed into law, and so that's nationwide. A lot of states also have additional protections. Virginia actually has two different additional protections just for the state of Virginia to protect anybody from being sued, provided they donate in good faith to a nonprofit organization. So there's a little bit of a caveat there. But no, that's something we have to educate a lot on. I'm thankful that you brought that up, because that is a sticky point for a lot of our donors, is they have this idea that they're going to get sued if they donate something and somebody gets sick, which is not possible. And also, there has never been a lawsuit ever brought against any organization for donated food, ever. But really, one of the things around that for the donors is that it's not so much about the lawsuit and the money, because they've got money, right? They've got lawyers and they can defend themselves usually against a lawsuit without much worry. But it is their brand that they're trying to protect, right? All it takes is one person to post on social media that they got sick by somebody's thing. And so we want to do a really good job to make sure that we help protect their brand. They're donating food in good faith to us, and so we also want to take care of them in return. But when they do bring up the, well, we'll get sued, that's really not true. And so there's some education that has to go around that. But we do, like was mentioned earlier, you do have to make sure that there's food safety, right? And handling food and distribution of food and storage of food. How many hours can something sit out before it needs to be refrigerated again? So we try to be very conscious of all of that in order to be good stewards of what is being donated to us to protect the brands of those organizations. But yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up. And I will say, California as a state is way ahead of the rest of the United States in a lot of their food waste and environmental policies. So I wish we had more of California stuff here in Virginia, and we are pushing for some of that policy. policies. So thank you very much. Someone else before I move on? I think you guys nailed it. I mean, you guys did a great job at all these complicated issues that can affect, or the ability to get healthy food to clients. Cold storage is the biggest thing that we see. A lot of our food pantries don't have cold storage. And so to get food, healthy food, fresh food, fruits and veggies and stuff, days before they're going to distribute to a client doesn't do them really any good. It's going to turn into food waste because it's going to spoil and they're just going to throw it away, which doesn't do anybody any good. So we try to mitigate that, and I'll explain that here in a little bit with how we're structured. So when it comes to dealing with food waste, or potential food waste, to prevent it, there's a couple different ways we can do that. So source reduction. Again, this is talking about in your home, your purchasing habits, how much food you buy in relation to how much you're going to actually make, making sure that we're not wasting it just through purchasing of it. Same thing for like a grocery store. How are their purchasing habits? Are they purchasing too much? And they end up just throwing stuff away because they overbought and they're not going to sell that much. And so they end up throwing stuff away because they didn't source it very well from the farm from the beginning. So that's the best way to reduce food waste. The second avenue is to recoup that food, rescue that food, and feed hungry people with it so they can donate it to food banks, soup kitchens, shelters, etc. So we can actually get this healthy food into the bellies of people. But what about the stuff that can't be eaten? It's still better to try to give that to animals for feed if possible. Better than going to the landfill. You can also there's industrial uses for it, which we don't do. Composting would be another avenue. The last place you want food waste to go is the landfill. It's estimated that if you were to weigh all of the landfills in the United States, 20% of that weight would just be fruits and vegetables. That's how much we throw away. And perishable foods, as it decomposes in a landfill, creates methane gas, which is 21 times more potent than CO2, and that goes into our atmosphere. So if you were to take all the countries in the world and say how much CO2 our country's producing, landfills would be the third largest country producer of CO2 on its own, just landfills. So that's how much is being produced in the landfill. So we're making efforts to see what can we do to help reduce the environmental impacts of food waste. But really, food equity is an underlying problem. For instance, the state of Virginia spends $160 billion annually to treat diabetes. Much of that is diet related. And as we've been talking about, those that are most impacted are usually minority groups that are struggling to put food on the table. And because fast food is cheaper, they have a worse diet, or they go to the food pantries, like was mentioned earlier, and it's a lot of canned goods, which is food and it's beneficial, but ultimately not the best for the diet. So some things are just naturally occurring. So when we talk about food deserts, it's a location where an individual cannot walk 15 minutes and find or purchase fresh foods. Now, again, this is just naturally occurring. So think about more rural areas, maybe not necessarily, here in high density areas of Prince William County or Fairfax or DC. But if you go out to Fauquier or maybe in Nokesville, where, it's still farmland, still rural, houses are still spread out. You can't walk for 15 minutes and get food. You got to get in your car and you got to drive to Bristow or Gainesville. You got to drive somewhere to actually get your food. Food swamps is any location where there's an availability of food, just not quality, healthy food. So again, think about the rows and rows of the fast food chains that are, side by side down the road, but there's no grocery store. So again, there's food, just not the healthiest food. So we call that a food swamp. But then food apartheid is kind of like a food desert. It's just that it was done intentionally. So it's a location where access to find or purchase fresh food is unavailable to racially motivated policies. This is true in Virginia. If you go down to Richmond, you can see the impacts of it. You can see it in DC, where, or, you know, even sometimes I think about the Route 1 corridor and just how, you know, policies and procedures and land use was designated for the benefit of some at the exclusion of others. And so that's true with where grocery stores are located. Is it, you know, are there liquor stores on every corner, or is there a healthy mart where somebody can go in and get fresh produce? There's a lot of conversation about this in DC with the different wards. Oh, 2 wards literally side by side. One ward will have 3 grocery stores and the other will have 0. And so you can go back and see how there was racially motivated policies put in place that impacted what went where because of the groups of people that were living in those different wards, different sections. And we saw that, you can see that down in Richmond, Virginia as well, where there were neighborhoods of color. And so they were excluded from getting grocery stores, while the neighborhoods of whites right next door were given all of the amenities for healthy food access. So still recovering as a country from those policies and procedures. So that brings me to us, Northern Virginia Food Rescue. So what are we all about? So our mission really is to be an innovative network of donor, volunteer, and distribution partners that are improving food resiliency and accessibility for our Northern Virginia community. So we try to leverage the technology, the 412 Food Rescue Hero app. And what we're attempting to do is have a food rescue program in every county throughout Northern Virginia. That's a community-based program focused on that county to mobilize volunteers in that community to support the food pantries in that community with their food donors. But it takes individuals like yourselves to make that happen. So we're part of a larger family of Food Rescue Heroes. So the Food Rescue Hero app was developed by 412 Food Rescue out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, about 6 years ago. And about four years ago, I came across it and reached out to the CEO, and it's like, hey, we could be doing this in Prince William County. Like, are you guys interested in expanding? And they were like, yeah, we're actually getting ready to launch in, I think, Philadelphia and Cleveland at the time were the 2 cities that they were talking to. So we actually met with them and loved what they were doing, and the technology was so simple and easy to use, a great back-end experience. And so we decided to bring that here, but it actually started with ACTS. So it was a program of ACTS called Prince William Food Rescue. We launched in August of 2019 to rescue food so that we were reducing food waste, hunger, and greenhouse gas emissions with a goal of 200,000 pounds of food our first year, but we did that in the first 5 months. And then 2 months later, the pandemic hit. So it just exploded. We had the right tool at the right time. The county worked with us to launch the Community Feeding Task Force. So now we also had a warehouse in Manassas that we could get bulk food, break it down, send it out, including the USDA's Farmer to Family Food Box program that was going on during the pandemic. But as we grew, we realized that this was going to be something that needed to be bigger than just Prince William County, and we wanted to expand it into the rest of Northern Virginia. And so we've launched Northern Virginia Food Rescue as its own 501c3 as a subsidiary nonprofit of ACTS. So we have our own board, our own staff, everything is on our own now. So we were able to expand. But kind of what we do, it's the same process. We work with donors that have food that they would be throwing away that's still perfectly good. And we redirect that to distribution sites. We have over 70 just here in Prince William County, everything from, our food pantries to Boys and Girls Clubs, senior centers, community centers, schools, just kind of a little bit of everything. If they have the ability to feed people in need, then we work with them. We have quite a few mobile home parks, which is basically our low-income housing throughout Prince William County. We don't, because we're not, we're not a city, we're not as dense as like Fairfax with the high-rise apartments. So mobile home parks is kind of our low-income housing. So we have quite a few that we work with. as well. So we have an app. It used to be Prince William Food Rescue. Obviously, we've got a new app, Northern Virginia Food Rescue, that allows us to be multi-county. So it can be downloaded on the App Store, on Google Play, depending upon what phone that you have. And on the back end, what our staff does is we basically work with the food donors, and we know who's open as a distribution site on what days of the week, what times that they're going to be serving people, what kind of food that they want. And so we schedule for food to go from the food donor to the distribution site on the days that they're going to be feeding people. So for instance, for Charlotte with Brew, so Bull Run Unitarian Universalist, we know which days of the month they're open and what time, and we try to send them food when they want it, so it's not sitting there going bad on them, and they actually have, you know, as much food, healthy food as possible to give their clients. Same thing with, we work with farmers markets to get their excess food as well. But again, we're pushing that out to the organizations that are going to be open and able to immediately feed people. But on the back end, we build out the rescue. So each one of these lines is a rescue, and we can see the status of the rescue as it's taking place. So we can tell whether it's been done, who the volunteer was, where it's going, about how much food. And so that allows us to track the food that's being moved around. And the app is very simple. It shows up in the app of where the rescues are available. Usually we post them around 8 o'clock or 7:30 in the morning for the day. And then, you know, first come, first serve, claim a rescue, and it's yours. You can click the little expand to see more information about the rescue itself. But usually has what time frame. It's usually about an hour or 2 hour window to pick up the food and drop it off, but it will provide driving directions, where you got to go and everything. Some of them are weekly rescues. So we have people that claim like every Monday, they'll do the same rescue every Monday. And then, you know, same time, same pickup, same drop off. And it becomes just their part of their volunteerism. It's just doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again every week. So once you've claimed a rescue, you can just hit the start, and it literally just walks you step by step. Now, if you've claimed it earlier, you can also find the rescue in My Rescues, and it'll pop up what you've claimed, and you can start it that way as well. Once you get there, you hit I've arrived at the pickup spot. If there's any instructions, those will pop up to you if you need to call somebody, text somebody when you're on your way, where to go when you get there. There's different instructions depending upon where you're going. It's got the amount of quantity of food that you can add items or adjust the items. Oh, let me go back. There's a plus or minus. So sometimes we're estimating what's going to be picked up. We don't know exactly what's going to be picked up. Sometimes we know exactly what it is. But often from the grocery store, we don't really know what we're going to get. So we just kind of estimate. And then when the food rescue hero gets there, they can actually update the quantities and the items. So we know exactly what was donated from that store, and then that helps the distribution side also to know what they're getting. Within the app, you can take a photo. You can take a selfie of yourself being a food rescue hero. You can post that directly to social media, but you don't have to. We do encourage, even just take a picture of the food that you got, because that allows us to do a little bit of quality control on the food that's being picked up. Sometimes the grocery stores will send stuff that really should be thrown away. And instead of throwing it away, they donated it and get credit for the donation, even though it's trash. So we have to address that from time to time and work with the stores to make sure we're just getting good quality stuff to our food pantries. And then again, you can do driving directions to where you got to go to drop it off. Here's what you're dropping off based on what you said you were picking up. We used to require signatures, but with COVID, that's gone away. So we just kind of skip the screen, but normally you could get a signature from the person that's receiving it at the food pantry or the senior center. And then you're done. And it's really that simple. Everything is done right through the app. And so with that, we've been able to do about 23,000 rescues now over the past 2.5 years. And those are volunteers in the community picking up food and dropping it off. And it's super, super easy to do. So we've looked at accessibility, which is what we do with our app. And so we've got Prince William Food Rescue as a program of Northern Virginia Food Rescue, but we've also now launched Fairfax. We launched Fairfax in November. So Fairfax is getting up and running right now, doing the same thing. And then hopefully Fauquier this spring, we plan to launch Fauquier Food Rescue, and then we'll kind of expand from there. So that's accessibility. How do we get food to people? So we can get it to the food pantries, but if somebody's stuck at home, if they're a senior citizen who can't leave their house, if somebody's got COVID and can't leave their house, we can actually get food to their doorstep using our app. And so we've done, I think about probably 5,000 to 6,000 no contact direct deliveries of food to people's homes throughout this community. But we also want to think about the resiliency of our food system. Again, it's great if we can rescue food, but we want to be able to make sure that we've got a good food supply. When the pandemic first hit, the grocery store shelves were empty. We still have supply chain issues with trucks and drivers and not enough of them. So food's not getting where it needs to be. I went to the grocery store yesterday and the shelves were pretty empty. So I don't know if you've seen that at grocery stores where you are, but there's still supply chain issues. And so we don't want that to negatively impact our food pantry. So what can we do to strengthen that? And that's mainly by working with our outdoor agriculture, the urban ag of Fairfax and Arlington, Alexandria. And we're even having some conversations about bringing indoor agriculture here in Prince William County on a large scale. So ultimately, this is kind of what we're trying to do. If every county has a food rescue program in it under one umbrella, we'll have real-time data on food insecurity needs throughout the entire Northern Virginia region. That'll let us know from our food distribution sites that, this pocket or this neighborhood suddenly has a spike in food insecurity need. And maybe we don't have enough food from the local grocery stores or whatever, but we know, hey, we're getting ready to get, pallets of food from some farms out in Fauquier, and we need to get a pallet of this food, into Arlington to a food to Alive, the organization that feeds people in Arlington. We need to get them a pallet of this fresh produce from the farms of Fauquier because there's a neighborhood that they're serving that needs more food. So this is going to help us both understand the food insecurity need, but also our food supply, and be more resilient as a region when it comes to dealing with food insecurity. The other thing that we've been doing is disaster response. So we've been doing that with the Community Feeding Task Force. We had a warehouse in Manassas that was county owned that they let us use during the pandemic, but they now needed that space back, so they gave us the boot. But the county worked with us, and we've got a new warehouse that we just moved into 2 weeks ago. It's where 234 and 66 come together. There's a Cracker Barrel out there. If you've ever been to the Cracker Barrel, we're literally the building next to it. We face the Cracker Barrel. So for some reason, my staff has been hungrier than normal, and I think it's because of we're facing Cracker Barrel. I'm just kidding, but that's where we're located. So we're still getting settled in, but that's where we'll be for at least the next 3 years, and then we'll figure out, what the need is and what we need to do after that. But we're real excited. It's a large space, so we're gonna be able to do a lot of good out of that. Our hope is that by year 5, we'll have rescued over 22.5 million pounds of food in Northern Virginia. Excuse me, that's the equivalent of over 18 million meals, but also a reduction of over 12 million pounds of CO2, because that food's not rotting in the landfill. So that's our big goal. We hope to have, multiple programs launched throughout Northern Virginia and doing what we're doing here, excuse me, in Prince William County. So any questions just about what we do or how it works or anything like that? Yes, Ms. Sharp.
Yeah, so I know that a couple of times Panera on Liberia has called us directly about coming and picking up food. For example, 2 weeks ago, after the big storm, they hadn't sold what they needed to sell on Monday, so they called us on Tuesday. Um, and I'm just hearing you talk about all the app and everything. I'm just curious how you go about uh, getting hooked up with some of these donors, because either they weren't able to use the system that day, or they're not hooked into it?
Yeah, so sometimes, we will reach out to organizations and they'll have an existing relationship with someone that's already picking up from them. And so they don't need us to be involved because it's already being taken care of. So then we're like, that's great. Like, we're not stepping on anybody's toes. Like, if there's existing relationships, keep them going. We're just there to help strengthen the system. But then when something like this happens, then they don't know where to turn to, and we're not on their radar. So feel free to pass along our information. You can give them the best person to get in touch with is John or Todd, but they can call our number. They also can go through our website. There's actually a food donor form. Wegmans uses it every day, where they can actually just go in and put in what they have to donate and submit it. And then it automatically populates in our system. We just assign where it needs to go and publish it for someone in the community to pick it up. So they're more than welcome to do that as well. But yeah, advocacy, letting those organizations know about us. And if it's something that you can do, then just do it. Like, we don't need to get in the middle of it. But if they call you and you're like, whoa, no, we can't, but here's who you need to talk to.
Yeah, so
Definitely
in
do that.
that particular situation, again, we didn't have the storage space
Right.
for a lot of bread products, to hold on to until the next food pantry. So,
Right.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're happy to help.
Can you maybe say more about then, like the distribution centers when once the food is rescued, um, are they all churches like Brew? Are there, I guess I know that Axe and Serve have their own food pantries, but what happens after the food is rescued?
Yeah, so it'll go directly to one of our sites that's open, that's going to be feeding people that day. So like the days that Brew's not feeding people, we don't send them food. They don't get stuff because we know that they don't have anywhere to put it, and it's probably going to go bad by the time they go to serve their clients. So we literally keep a list of all of the food distribution sites, and it's built into our system. So it's not like, our system has all the information, but we know who's open on what days, how many families they're going to serve, because we also don't want to oversupply food. Otherwise, they're going to get stuck with food that they can't distribute, and then they got to throw it away. So we really try to do the best that we can at matching from, is it Target? How much food are we getting from Target typically? Okay, well, how much food is that? Is that enough for one organization, or do we need to split it? Some of the food from Target goes to this organization that's open today, and some of it goes to this organization that's also open today, because it'll feed both of their clients. Some of our, so the House Student Leadership Center, which is near Potomac Mills Mall, they have hundreds of kids that they work with every day and their families. And so we'll get a large donation from Sam's Club on Wednesdays. Our box truck goes there, picks up pallets of food. It goes right around the corner to the house and drops it off, because they are going to move that food. They're going to use pallets worth of food. But not every organization obviously is going to do that. Some of them, they just need 10 boxes of food. And so that's fine. We can do that. So we really try to be a reactive organization. We're reacting both to the food donors and how much food they're trying to donate, and we're reacting to our food distribution sites. What days are they open? How many families are they serving? Is there anything particular they want or don't want? And the other thing we're really going to be trying to do over the next couple of years is trying to purchase ethnically appropriate foods. There's a lot of communities that need particular types of food that we just don't get donated. Like, nobody's donating halal meat. Nobody's donating maseka. We're not getting those as donations. So we're gonna have to buy it. So fortunately, the county provided ARPA funding for us to use to purchase food. That's the American Rescue Plan Act funding, which was after CARES that just came out this past year. So the county has given us money that we're specifically going to be using to purchase food. So we're going to be purchasing some of these culturally appropriate ethnic foods for those populations to try to give them more of what they want and need. Dairy, we don't get a lot of dairy donated. I mean, we do get some, but not enough to support all 70 distribution sites. So we're looking at what kind of dairy, what kind of other protein do we need to purchase so that we are providing this healthier food options. Purchasing from local farms and local farmers. We want to support local business, and some of our local farmers are smaller and they don't have the bandwidth, and they're not producing enough to have contracts with Giant or Target. Like, they're just not doing that, but they still got to sell what, they're still trying to make a living. They're still growing really good food. So what if we were to buy some of that from them and get that into our food donation stream and get that out to the food pantry? So there's things that we're looking at doing to really try to support these organizations. But back to your question, it's because we know what days and how many families and what time they're serving people, and that drives what food goes where on what day of the week.
Thank you.
Yep.
I worked for an organization called Leah's Pantry in San Diego.
Yeah.
And we did nutrition education for food pantries.
Mm-hmm.
And I am curious how much of that is happening, because we had a lot of those cultural competency issues for food distribution. And I was, so we produced cookbooks and would put together food samples and encouraged, and then we built basically a healthy food pantry certification system. They were in the process of that when I left work with them, but is there something like that in place in Virginia right now?
So that's awesome, and would love to have more conversation with you about that. Education is something, and nutritional education is something that's very important to us. There's not really much of that in Prince William County. I think Fairfax does, but I don't know really any other county that has something like that in place. But we definitely would love to have that as part of what we provide for our food pantries. I think perhaps a conversation at some point with you would be fantastic and very beneficial, if that's something that you're interested in.
I'm always interested in talking.
Okay. Well, email me and I'll connect you with some of my team. But yeah, that's a big part of what we would love to do is nutrition education. And actually, our two Fairfax employees that we hired for Fairfax both just finished masters in nutritional education. So no, it's very important to them as well. So yes, love to chat. Shoot me an email.
How do you become a distribution site?
So we've got here in Prince William County. So John is our partner relations coordinator. So John would have a conversation with someone that's interested in if they've got a site, a location. So we don't work with just individuals. We work with other organizations. But it just begins with a meeting with John. We do an onboarding with that organization. So we have a chance to kind of set and manage some expectations, but also find out what the needs are of the organization. Again, so we can build their profile and go through. We do a little bit of safety training. We also encourage every organization to have a food safety certification as well. That's how it gets off the ground. Any other questions? I have a question for you all. So what are you guys going to do to reduce food waste and food insecurity in our community? What can you do?
I have a related question, just
Sure.
similar to that. We do a lot of composting
Mhm.
after every meal, anything that's not meat or, well, we don't eat much bread, but bread or something, vegetables and things, we put in a section. But I was surprised to hear, I didn't realize till just now that we're contributing to the CO2 with our compost pile, even though it's not that big.
So composting is better than it being in the landfill. But what ends up happening in the landfill gets covered by all kinds of other stuff that traps the breakdown process. And so the gases end up getting trapped in there, and then it eventually releases as CO2. And a composting pile, that's a little bit different because it's actually turning into something that you're going to be able to reuse, hopefully for gardening or planting. So we're big fans of composting. And while we don't offer composting services, we definitely encourage folks to contact Compost Crew. Was it Veterans Composting? I think they're in Fairfax and maybe in Prince William. There's a couple composting organizations that we definitely would refer people to for home composting or their businesses, and they work with the Balls Ford Road compost facility and take stuff there. So yes, no, composting is great. It's a little bit different than it ended up in the landfill. The process is a lot different. Yeah, good question. Couple hands, so whoever. Veronica.
Hi, Aaron. What a great presentation. Personally, I do composting just like Amy tries to do. And 2 days ago, I ordered my vinyl worms. So I have ordered also my composter. So I'm excited to see how that will work. And the soil that will come out from there, I'm going to use it in my vegetable garden.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, so part of what we do, we don't do composting, but one of the things that we also have been doing is food scraps for farmers. So we actually are working with several organizations, businesses that are separating out what they can't donate, but it's still food scraps. And we actually have farmers that pick that stuff up and take it back to their farms for their animals. The Wegmans in Stonebridge is participating in this. We had a couple of restaurants here in Manassas. I think a couple of our food pantries are doing it as well. So, they get stuff that they can't hand out to the public. By the time the client showed up, it's gone bad. So again, instead of throwing it away, we can try to coordinate with farmers. We've got buckets with lids and a whole process to do that. So that's another thing that we've been working on piloting as well.
It's good to hear that some food pantries are participating in that, because I'm often rather dismayed about the food that has to be thrown away.
Mm-hmm.
And it just gets dumped in our trash.
Yeah.
So that's good to know as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's something you've got a food pantry or food distribution site interested in. Rebecca's the one to talk to about that on my team. And you can email me and I'll connect you to the people on my team that you need to contact if that helps. Happy to do that. So I know I've made a conscious effort to try to do a better job with my shopping habits and my food purchasing habits. I love to cook. I cook all the time. It's a creative thing for me, I think. And so, but I can do the same thing. I have all these grandiose ideas of what I'm going to make during the week. And then come Friday, I've, cooked half of what I planned. So I have to be really good about, making sure that I'm not contributing to, the food waste issue by my purchasing and cooking habits and plans. So always ways to improve. So if all of us did the same thing, and then that would drive some change at the grocery store level, because they wouldn't be selling as much as they are, which means that they would have to change their practices, which would be a good thing. And in the meantime, we could continue to get some of that food that's not being purchased and get it into the donation stream so we can help those that are in need in our community. So it's a win-win all the way around. Thank you for my time, and thank you for having me present on here today. Despite the weather and the setbacks of this time of year, but I appreciate all of you and your interest in being good stewards of food and supporting those that are in need, our neighbors in need, right here in our community. We've got a great community, and so I'm thankful to each of you and appreciate all of your efforts. And hopefully I'll see your name pop up on our app, being a food rescue hero and moving some food to those in need right here in our community. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, so our Zoom, Charlotte has another question. Go ahead.
No, I was doing the clapping.
Oh,
Oh, it was
clapping.
clapping, not hand raising. Okay, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Aaron. It's been very interesting.
Yes.
My pleasure.
We do have the Zoom, we were scheduled to go till 5 if people have more questions or want to do breakout rooms, but I'm also noticing that we've lost a few people throughout the day and cameras are off. So we can end here if people like to, but I'll give you all a couple minutes to ruminate and to ask Aaron or each other any other questions and share other comments, thoughts about the day that you have.
Well, I jumped on for this last session because I ended up with other things on my schedule today. I hope it was a good day and that you did have a few more people participating earlier on.
Yeah, we had a few people come and go. And the first 2 presentations were recorded, so as well. So hopefully they will be up on YouTube later. And folks can definitely check those out. And I hope that this all doesn't stop here. We've heard from 3 really wonderful official speakers today. We heard a little bit more informally from Veronica from the Prince William County Soil and Water Conservation District, and from Joelle from Interfaith Power and Light. We talked about ways to get involved, as our houses of worship and with volunteering for hands-on initiatives. And so I really hope that each of us are able to carry this forward beyond today and continue connecting with each other across organizations.
Yeah, I think the only thing I want to say at this point is what's next. I mean,
What's next?
What's next? What are we doing now? This was wonderful. I appreciate all the time and effort that went into you guys doing it and all the changes that you guys the event itself went through. And I'm glad that you guys followed through and did this. Thank you so much to Rabbi Liz and her assistant, and all the speakers and participants. But what's next? Let's keep going. Like, what do we do now?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I would definitely say next, we're still trying to do this water cleanup at Marumsco watershed, or the park cleanup. That was supposed to happen yesterday. We got snowed out. My weather app again says that next week is supposed to be super cold but sunny, but one of the teens just texted me like after I announced that earlier on in our call that actually, no, we are supposed to get more snow again next weekend. So I don't know, we'll keep an eye on it, but eventually we're gonna go clean up that park. For sure. And Veronica's been super helpful with helping me coordinate that. I definitely encourage folks to get on that app that Aaron showed us. Ner Shalom will hopefully be creating our community garden, and that will be its own eventually food resource. I don't know what else, what next?
I'm hoping that the place I found with the compostable supplies is going to be able to happen, because
Yeah.
that would be cool.
That's true. When we were planning, just to explain a little bit what Simcha's talking about, when we were planning this event for in person, and we were hoping to get some like food vendors and things like that, as we were going to be there all day, we found that places like food trucks and stuff didn't really have sustainable food, like coffee cups and things like that. So we looked into companies that do that and got like a sample box, and they're really great quality of like compostable plates, coffee cups, even the lids that are like a little bit more plasticky. They're not as papery, but they too are made from something that composts, that's organic. And it's pretty cool. So as we return to in-person things, hopefully we'll be able to continue to do it, you know, in a more green way, and just keep making these small steps. But as Joelle said, and Galaxy talked about this a bit, and it probably came up in some of the other talks too throughout today. But like a lot of these actions are pretty small potatoes in the grand scheme of systemic inequity and climate crisis. And so we also just want to keep our eye on what our government's doing and what we can do to advocate for systemic changes as well. And you know, right now we're maybe in a sticky situation with our environmental stuff here in Virginia, but hopefully we'll address that. You see Amy logging off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How many people have left?